Let's rock, baby.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Rose Tinted Looking Glass. I've got yet another Capcom game for y'all today. I promise at some point I'll try to find another developer to talk about later, but I like a lot of Capcom games, so, you know. The Devil May Cry series is one that I have a lot of history with. I've played and beaten the good games in this series an uncountable number of times, and even the worst games in the series aren't necessarily bad games, they're just bad for Devil May Cry. Hell, they could even be fun if you're not taking them seriously. I'd argue, though, that the black sheep of the series is actually the first game. It's probably the most different out of the rest of the games in the series. And I've heard the sentiment being shared that there's not going to be another game like this made ever again, just because of how weird it is. DMC1 acts as the first game of its kind to fall into the character action genre. This specific genre has gone through a couple of names over time, with the first one just being vaguely thrown into the action-adventure genre, and then later as kind of a misnomer, the hack-and-slash genre, which I personally don't like as a label for it, or any game of its ilk. And now eventually we reach the character action genre, which works a lot better for it just because you're playing as a character who uses their unique strengths and backgrounds to go through the game and get stronger. Since this is the first character action game in the video game space, there's obviously a lot of weird growing pains here. Things that don't quite make sense for it, and obviously if you're used to playing more modern character action games, then this is gonna have some weird stuff going on that you might not like. Especially considering, if you know the history of this series and Resident Evil, then you'll also know that DMC1 started as some version of Resident Evil 4. And without getting into that game too much, Resident Evil 4 will have its own video way down the line, probably. Certain development builds of Resident Evil 4 kind of became and splintered off their own games. Each of these weird Splinter games kind of had their own popularity and following associated with them. And luckily for me, Devil May Cry was a series that stuck around and actually got pretty popular. I want to take some time today and talk about this weirdness here. It made a pretty big impression on me, and thankfully starting with the first character action game to ever exist means that this specific genre has been one of my favorites since I played it. I make it kind of an active goal now to try to play as many character actions as I can. And yeah, if you've never seen this game before, then maybe you can find a new favorite. I partially doubt that just because it's kind of weird, but who knows, it's definitely cool. And if you're already a fan of the genre, then maybe you can sit back and enjoy the history of it here. We're on a pretty sizable journey today, so go ahead and take a seat, get a bag of popcorn, your favorite drink, and yeah, just enjoy the ride with me, I guess.
Devil May Cry.
Two millenniums ago, there was a war between the human world and the other, the underworld. But somebody from the underworld woke up to justice and stood up against this legion alone. His name was Sparta. Later, he quietly reigned the human world and continued to preserve harmony until his death. He became a legend. The legendary Dark Knight, Sparta.
Devil May Cry. Sorry, we closed at 9. Again, no password. I can't seem to get any real business. Whoa, slow down, babe. Well, what do we have here? Nature calls? It's in the back.
So, you must be the handyman who'll take any dirty job. Am I correct?
Almost. I only take special jobs, if you know what I mean.
You're the man who lost a mother and a brother to evil 20 years ago. The son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta, Mr. Dante.
Well, the way I figure it, in this business a lot of your kind comes around. And if I kill each one that comes, eventually I should hit the jackpot sooner or later.
In that case, you should be used to this sort of thing.
Ha! Time to go to work, guys. Even as a child, I had powers. There's demonic blood in me.
What strength?
You were the first one to know about my vengeance. Looks like I'm getting closer.
It seems that way, but I'm not your enemy. My name is Trish. I came here to seek your help, to put an end to the underworld.
What?
"20 years ago, Mundus, the Emperor of the Underworld, resurrected.
Mundus?
Yes. His powers were sealed by Sparta. He's attempting to gain control of the human world once again. He has been preparing to open the gate on Malay Island. The castle is above this cliff. Come on, let's go! Ha!
Right, so I'm not really sure how to follow any of that up. I just like the cutscenes, purely from a nostalgia factor. Make no mistake, this game is incredibly campy. It came out in 2001, and it was from Capcom, no less, so if you think the dialogue is weird or stilted, that's because it is. It just comes with the territory. The yellow orb is the first item that we have access to. If we die in combat, then it revives us in the same room that we died at. If you don't have one of these, you have to restart from the beginning of a mission. We like to call them yorbs. DMC1 also has a bunch of neat little secrets in it. Going off the beaten path, like here, will reward you in things like currency or health upgrades. Here I pick up a blue orb fragment, which works like Zelda heart pieces. Collect 4 of them and you get a health extension. Very occasionally you'll get a full blue orb. We also call them blorbs. So all the Devil May Cry games work on a mission-based structure. They basically just act like levels. They give you a clear objective, and specifically in these earlier games, they might involve something along the lines of finding a specific item and not always just fighting a certain enemy or boss. Specifically with this game, the missions are really short. A lot of them can be beaten within a couple of minutes if you know what you're doing. This first mission involves us picking up red orbs, or rorbs. They act as currency. You can use them to purchase items through the in-game shop to help you in case you're struggling, or otherwise can be used to purchase new moves for some of our weapons. We don't have any moves to buy right now, and the shop won't even let us access it right now anyway, because the third thing we can buy in only this game is doors for some reason. You don't see this again in any other DMC game, and it's super weird that they would program something like this because it just isn't ever necessary. I guess just for the first mission it kind of makes sense because it gives you an opportunity to run around the level and kind of grapple with the controls. And I say grapple because the control scheme for this game is really weird. So remember whenever I mentioned that there was weird growing pains with this genre? Yeah, the triangle button is jump, the circle button is attack, and you can only fire your guns when you're locking on and pressing square. X just checks stuff. It's super weird and obviously doesn't really fit if you're trying to play a video game like you would expect, just because again this is the first of its kind, so there was some weird stuff going on with even so much as the controls. Even with that being said though, the fact that this started as a Resident Evil game means that it has a really neat horror atmosphere to it. The music and echoey sound design really does sell the fact that this is supposed to be kind of horror-y. You got the trademark fixed camera angles and stuff of Resident Evil fame with it too. This, along with the overall oppressive atmosphere, would be largely ditched in other DMC games to focus more on its strengths of just satisfying combat, which isn't a bad thing at all, but it goes a long way to making this game feel particularly unique. So we finally pick up 45 red orbs and unlock the door. Cool. And in case I forget later, if you stand too close to any of these locked doors, then they'll attack you and take some health away. So another pretty big part of my childhood, and specifically with the games that I've grown up with, are things that you've seen in other RTLGs. Things like my personal involvement with certain games and how they affected me, and other stuff too, like finding cheat codes for mostly just the PS2 games that I played. But I would like to add a third one, and that would be the childhood trauma section. For my first entry, why the hell do the trees gotta move like that? Like, I don't know, something about the animation of the trees just moving like that doesn't look right. It's super uncanny, and as a kid, it made me super uncomfortable paired with the music and all that. I know this is a really, really tame first entry, but it'll get weirder and more uncomfortable, and there's specifically one missable thing that I do want to talk about because, like, well, we'll get into it when we see it. Awful quiet over here. Oh. That's a suspicious-looking marionette. Okay, cool, I guess we have a key now. Fuck. Okay, so we're finally seeing some combat now. Pressing triangle without really thinking about it will initiate a simple 3-attack combo string. There's at least 2 delay combos, which is to say if you don't just mash triangle and instead wait to hit the button again before your last attack, it'll have a couple of extra inputs, one of which being this twirly attack, and then if you wait a little longer, it'll be a million stab. Out of the gate, you can also do what's called a high time. I don't actually know if it's called that in this game, but either way, it's a launcher. You'll take an enemy up in the air and you can do an air combo with them. Or, in the case of this game, just a simple helm splitter. In order to do the high time, though, you have to lock on to an enemy first by pressing R1. This will also allow you to use your guns in combat, too. As I mentioned before, you have to lock on first before you're able to fire anything. We'll get a couple more swords later in the game, and these simple attacks are what all of them start out with. When we get our second sword, we'll be able to upgrade it and put more moves on it, and those get pretty cool. Look at that, there's a whole plane chilling here. That's pretty cool. Secret orb spot. Hell yeah. So I don't actually know what these things are called, but they're attack switches. Just wail on them and then they'll activate something in the room. This is the only time it's used as a puzzle, sort of say, just because it's hidden. And I guess that's because once you know about it the one time, if you see it again, you know what to do with it. But they show up all across the series. And I don't know, I thought it was just interesting to mention that they exist and they do stuff. So we take care of this little enemy gauntlet down here and head back up afterwards. We wake up all the marionettes in the plane room, and then head out through the door that we just unlocked. Hell yeah. That's the first mission finally done, and now that we're done getting all the introductory stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to mission 2. Starting immediately with the fighting this time, I see. Works for me. So we walk to the end of this hallway and... Yeah, fuck you, sword, you're mine now. So the description on Alistor wasn't lying. The attack speed of the weapon isn't immediately way faster. It's not any faster than Force Edge, your starting sword. But in case it wasn't super clear from the cutscene that was just playing, this weapon does benefit from being super fast, basically. But only really in one aspect, and we'll get to that whenever I activate it. Hey, speaking of which, so pressing L1 will activate what is called Devil Trigger. The effects from what Devil Trigger can do vary based on what weapon you have equipped, but in the case of Alistor, it'll basically just increase your damage and mostly your speed. Not only your attack animations, but also your running speed. It also influences your gunshots too, so you'll fire little lightning bolts out of your pistols, and it works for all the guns as well. What the game doesn't mention is that you also have the ability to use your Devil Trigger shots in your base form by just holding the fire button. It takes a little too long to actually viably use, but it's kinda cool. But later games have this system done just a little bit better anyway. Why is a shotgun so easy to miss in this game? Like, I feel really bad for people. It seems like something that could be easily missed. Oh yeah, I guess I should talk about the shotgun. It's a shotgun. It does exactly what you think it does. Huge close range damage and aggressive fall off from further ranges. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of super weird that even though this game spawned from Resident Evil, there's not any ammo mechanics. Like, I know if you're a modern DMC fan, it would kind of be stupid to assume that ammo would ever be a consideration in these games, and that's fair. But just in terms of its origins, I think it's kind of interesting that they didn't bother with an ammo mechanic of any kind in the first game. I guess to balance that, all the guns do some pretty low damage, so there's that. A lot of the times they're kind of just for setup or dead air tools. The pistol's good for enemies that are far away or you can't really reliably hit with your sword. And the shotgun at close ranges can get enemies away from you if you decide to blast them in the face. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a bad system, but it is, again, really weird just considering the origin of this game. Speaking of weird Resident Evil leftovers, there sure are a lot of locks with keys that need them. Awful weird to find in an action game, of course. But it's these little breadcrumb trails that you don't have access to just yet. I guess the other part of the horror aspect of this game is just its mystery. Trying to figure out where everything goes. It's not like a super important thing just because the mission tells you what your goals need to be before you start them, but even still, if you're playing this game for the first time and come across something that's foreign to you, it's like, oh yeah, well, I'll keep that in my mind for later. Ow, I told you the doors bite. So another weird tiny thing that I really like, depending on what weapon you have equipped, will change the sort of silhouette around your screen to whatever element the weapon has. So obviously for Alistor you have lightning going around, and I don't know, I just think that's kind of cool. It changes for the 3 primary weapons that you'll be using through your playthrough. But I don't know, just kind of a cool, neat detail. It's like I made a whole video about how cool Capcom is for making proper weapon respect or something. So we whack this back, open up the hatch, and fall down here, and hey look! We're back here again. Interconnected maps are always cool, and I know Resident Evil is a big proprietor of those, but they're just cool in basically every game that they're in. Being like, oh, that's where this leads. Like, I don't know, that's always cool to me. So we try to leave again, but oh no, we're trapped. These enemies are referred to as Sin Scissor. They're relatively weak and easy to take down. Their weakness though is made up for the fact that they can clip through walls whenever they want to. They're kinda ghosts, they can kinda just phase in and out of stuff. Timing an attack just right will cause them to parry their scissors with your swords and have them fling their scissors out of the way, leaving them open for an attack. You can kind of just get by wildly swinging and knocking their scissors out of the way, and then from there it's as easy as just hitting them in the face a couple times and then they just go down. There's a mini-boss variant of these enemies that is a lot more aggressive and way harder to take down, but anytime you see Sin Scissors or Sin Scythe, it's not really a huge deal. The enemy variety in this game specifically is also really cool. I'll talk about the bestiary more later whenever I show it off, but basically all the enemies have their own little functions and weaknesses that you have to pay attention to. Especially if they're particularly problematic, it might be imperative for you to focus on the weaknesses of the enemies and really use that to your advantage. And I guess thematically it makes a lot of sense too. I mean, somebody who calls themselves a devil hunter would probably have a bestiary around that let them know what the creatures they face do and how to take care of them. But for some reason in this game it seems like it's particularly important. We'll just call it another weird Resident Evil remnant of having problematic enemies that need to be dealt with in specific ways. So real quick, we're going to take a look at the shop section real fast. While in any normal scenario, I would implore you to pick whatever option sounds good or one that you're familiar with if you're a returning player. I will say that if you have no idea what to buy and you haven't gotten it yet, probably get Stinger as soon as possible. It's a really simple, really effective gap closer. And it's so pivotal to the movesets in Dante in all of these games that I kind of feel like it just needs to be a part of the base moveset again. All the games you have to buy it, and I just kind of feel like we should stop needing to buy it. Like, I don't know, we know how it works, and it would be best if it was just available to us from the get-go, because I miss it every time I restart a new playthrough in any of these games. But yeah, anyway, just pick it up and use it, it's good. Yeah, that's a good sign. Cool, I guess we go that way then. Big bridge. Very cool, very pretty. Okay, well, I guess we go back now. Bridge jump scare. Oh no, it's water. Oh no, it's boners. So this room is the only one that acts like some sort of timer whenever you're in it. I'm not entirely sure why, but I mean, you don't really have to worry about it so much. Just obviously don't spend 10 minutes in here. Best course of action in here is simply take out the shotgun and blast the Sargassos as fast as you can. You basically have to aggro them first before they get their hurt box turned on, which is their only real defining characteristic. Just aggro them, pop them twice, and then jump back up through the weird light shaft thing.
Surprise. I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours.
So this guy is Phantom. He acts as the first boss of Devil May Cry 1, and anybody familiar with this game will know that Phantom acts as a particularly huge roadblock, a real spike in difficulty, to put it bluntly. This lava spider scorpion thing has a couple of different attacks, and it can be pretty demanding for a player to try to figure out, especially considering that they're so squishy. If you haven't noticed, you kind of take a lot of damage in this game. Even a glancing blow will take off like a fifth of your health bar, so individual mistakes are really punishing. Talking more about Phantom specifically though, as I mentioned before, he's got a couple of attacks. For one, he has a grab attack that I didn't know that he had until this playthrough, weirdly enough. But he also has the ability to block your attacks by simply moving his limbs in front of his face. This also means that the rest of his body can't be attacked at all unless you get on top of him, which you can jump on his back and start attacking him there, where he largely can't do anything, but he will eventually shake you off. It's also kind of hard to land on his back because anything regarding platforming in this game is kind of a nightmare, but if you happen to land on there from, say, trying to avoid his attack perchance, then it can open up a pretty unique opportunity for you there. There's also this bit here where he charges a fireball, and if you attack him at just the right time, you can end up blowing the fireball up in his mouth and it'll do some damage and obviously not launch a projectile at you, which is just really cool and satisfying to pull off. I also like that as his health gets lower, his lava gets cooler and kind of turns into obsidian. It's really neat. So let's talk about the ranking screens a little bit too, because I haven't brought it up yet. Minor stuff right now, basically, whenever a boss was present and you defeated it in the mission, then the little art in the background will appear of whatever boss that you defeated during that mission. Also, the weapon that you have currently equipped will change the font as well for the mission clear symbol. The mission rankings themselves range from D to S and are determined by things like how much damage you've taken, how long you spent in the mission, how many orbs you've collected, and whether or not you used items. What determines mission rankings changes for every game, just about, but what remains consistent with all the games is that the ranking you get at the end of a mission will net you some bonus orbs. Obviously, the higher rank you get, the more orbs you get. Oh shit, he's still mad. So the cool thing about this weird chase scene thing specifically is that you are supposed to run away from Phantom here, but you can actually fight him. It just nets you some extra orbs and ultimately isn't worth it, especially if your health is already low. And considering his only attack is throwing fireballs as fast as he can, it's pretty dangerous, but the idea is cool. Also, fun fact, the pillars he destroyed are going to permanently be like that for the rest of the game. Just a neat attention to detail. So we come out here and use the Pride of Lion and... Ow. Okay, so first thing first, try to side roll that opening attack because it just happens partway through the cutscene and it is going for you. These enemies are known as Shadow, and if that blindside attack wasn't evident enough, these enemies are kind of super brutal. They're basically mini bosses, and having one hard fight right after the other is kind of super daunting, so let's break down this enemy real fast. Shadows are known typically for being super evasive. They're really hard to hit with your sword, and when you finally land a hit on them, they'll end up just immediately retaliating any melee hits. You instead have to try your hardest to shoot them with your guns until their little core pops out, and then you can start wailing on them with melee. Do this enough times and eventually they'll go into a suicide explode mode where they try to grab you as hard as possible, and if they do, then they'll end up likely killing you with the explosion. When you see them turn red, just avoid them by getting on top of ledges and making as much distance as possible. The game, of course, doesn't tell you any of this, and you kind of just have to trial and error your way through it to figure out what's going on with this enemy. Unless, of course, you consult the bestiary, which, again, we'll get to eventually. So next we enter this long spirally staircase area, which as a kid I always used to get lost in, trying to figure out which direction to go in. So yeah, just climb all the way up and get the death sentence. It's a key item. Unfortunately, you can't use it as a weapon, but, you know, it'd be cool to, though. I always imagined trying to swing this thing around as a real weapon, especially as a kid. And, like, I don't know, I think it would just be neat to have that as, like, a thing at some point that somebody could make as, like, a mod or something. There's a couple of key items that have the same description of can't be used as a weapon, and I do the same thing with all of them. So we enter the bedroom, suspicious mirror and all, and we go in here and stab the statue.
This stinking hole was the last place I thought I'd find anyone with some guts.
What do you mean there's another fucking boss? So this is Nello Angelo. Like any good rival swordsman fight, he kind of acts as like a mirror to the player. Most of his moves are taken directly from your moveset, and as a result, there's kind of a lot of neat interactions you can have with him. He can not only block your attacks, but you can also parry his incoming strikes. Do this enough times consecutively and you'll leave him open for a melee combo. What's also really cool, if you decide to use your devil trigger, the augmented speed from Alistor will make it to where you attack much faster than him, and more importantly, much faster than he can retaliate. See, attacking his block enough times will mean that he'll retaliate with an attack to stop you from pressuring him. But using Devil Trigger here will basically overwhelm him and make it to where you can just wail on him as much as you want to. That being said, you do have to time your Devil Trigger accordingly, because if you get it to an opportunity where you break his block but then he's ready for an attack, it means you won't have enough time to connect with him before he still retaliates, so there is still some thought involved and it's not just mindless wailing. Overall, this fight specifically is pretty simple, but the presentation of it is super cool. He teleports all around the huge stage that you're fighting him in, occasionally throwing projectiles if he's too far away or closing the distance with his own version of Stinger. Even still though, having a third boss back to back to back is really brutal at this point, but maybe by now you get the point that this game isn't necessarily fucking around. So we entered into the next mission to find our inventory being opened by the game itself, telling us basically that we're on a time limit now. And immediately after this, we're faced with yet another shadow. You've already seen how the shadow fights, so I'll just skip this part. Instead, I want to go over something that we actually started the game with that I have so far neglected to mention. Starting the game, in your inventory, aside from your starting melee weapon Force Edge and your starting firearms Ebony and Ivory, you're given 2 items, one of which being usable. It's called the Devil Star. It just restores some health whenever you use it. And more importantly, the amulet, which is in your inventory. Obviously, this has some sort of implication for Dante's past, and seeing Nello Angelo react to it so negatively, or just the way that he did, I guess, obviously raises some questions, but we won't go over that right now. Vital Stars also are something you can purchase in the shops and occasionally find in the game. You don't get just the one, you can find and obtain several of them if you need a little boost to your HP. I also really like these menus, like, a lot. I don't know, it's got the weird sort of foggy filter that the end mission screen does, and obviously being able to see these weird sort of hyper-realistic models of the weapons spinning into place, and if it's a gun, then it does like a test fire, is super cool to me. It sort of further propels the game's weird style, even with something so mundane as just the items that you have access to. And with that being said, this is probably the shortest mission that we get to play in the game. Just jump down here, go through the weird lion door, and then the mission's done. It's that simple. I guess the challenge comes in from trying to fight the shadow, and if you're really bad at fighting them, then it can probably eat away a lot of your time. But considering I've played this game so much, it's mostly a non-issue, and we just get through it without any problems. Oh yeah, so this mission's a thing. We enter into the castle sewer system, and it's not really a whole lot to write home about. It's very Capcom-ish though, which is pretty neat still. I guess there is one thing to talk about. There's this weird, like, orb shrine thing. You beat the shit out of it and it'll give you a bunch of orbs. When you start attacking it, it starts a timer that ticks down until eventually it breaks on its own accord. So just wail on it with as many attacks as you can. The stronger you hit it, the bigger the orbs are. These are kind of dotted all across the game, and they start in this mission specifically, but ultimately, it's not like a big deal. I kind of find the orb payouts for these, whatever they're called, to be a lot better in other games. I just feel like they're not very worth in this game, but they're free, so, I mean, whatever, oh well. So my award to the most forgettable enemy in DMC1 is probably the Beelzebub. They're just a lot of bugs. They always attack you in swarms, and they have a tiny amount of health per bug. The best way to deal with them is just to take out your shotgun and blast them until they go away. They often have attacks where they basically spit maggots at you, and if they catch you, then it'll start draining your health just by a tiny amount. Moving in any capacity will basically shake the bugs off of you. And I mean, other than that, there's not really much else to write home about with these enemies specifically. I'm pretty sure they're only used in like 3 rooms, and 2 of them are right here, so, whatever. So we enter the next section of the sewers, with the only thing being different being a lighting change. At the end of the hallway is this enemy. So this guy is another mini-boss. To my knowledge, I think it's the only other enemy you could feasibly count as a mini-boss in this game, and obviously it's a variant to the Sin Scissor. This is a Death Scissor, and after thinking about it for a good long while, I'm pretty sure this is my least favorite enemy in the game. It's basically just the Sin Scissor, but with more health and a really annoying corkscrew spin attack that is basically impossible to dodge unless you use audio cues for it. Because of how Sin Scissor and Death Scissor work, you can only hit them by attacking their head. which means their hitbox is absolutely tiny. The health of the Death Scissor enemy is actually evident by what horns are breaking. It'll start with one and then the other will break, and then finally you'll break the skull and the enemy will leave you alone. Make no mistake, so far with all of the bosses and mini-bosses I have died at least once, but this enemy in this room specifically has killed me more times than the rest of the run. It's just annoying and not fun to fight. I really don't like it. It's weird too because there's kind of another variant on top of the Death and Sin versions of enemies, and those are the Scythe variants. The Scythe versions of both of these enemies are much easier. The Sin Scythe is easy simply because they don't block as often and you can basically just shotgun them twice and they'll die. And solely, the Death Scythe is much easier because it doesn't have that stupid corkscrew. We'll see later on whenever we fight one. Instead, they have these weird, like, magical ethereal pillars that'll propel you up in the air. But widely speaking, they don't do anything other than inconvenience your movement. It's not even like a big issue. You can just jump or attack as soon as you get thrown up in the air, and then it just doesn't do anything for the enemy. So yeah, after finally taking this guy down, we go ahead and get done with the sewer. I don't know why I had so many negative things to say about it. I guess I just don't like this level, I guess. Also, yeah, at this rate, I'm sure it doesn't surprise you that this enemy used to scare me as a kid too. I also like that it still laughs even as it's dying. Like, I don't know, that's kind of freaky and neat. Okay, mission 7. The key item we just picked up is actively draining our HP. So we're on a time limit to get to where we need to. I guess by this point it would be good to mention as well that green orbs, or gorbs, restore your HP whenever you collect them. Small note too, if you collect green orbs while your health is still full, you'll instead get red orbs for it, which is kinda cool. Pretty sure all the games are like that, but I could be wrong about that. Also, oh my god, dude, lay off, what is your problem? So we exit the sewer now, and we need to get back to the bedroom as soon as possible. One neat and really convenient thing about this area specifically is that this pillar will shoot all the way up. From there, all you have to do is fall halfway back down and you'll reach the bedroom again, so you can get here within no time flat. So we complete this mission, and as it turns out, that passageway opened up a tiny door to go through, and man, I just love this shot of the main, like, foyer area. All zoomed out and stuff like that, that's really cool. Uniquely, this is one of the times that you actually aren't in a mission, so you can just look at it without any time penalties for rankings or anything. I've seen on the wiki that these are called intermissions, so that's what I'm going to be using to sort of highlight when they happen, and there is a specific time that's actually pretty important that I do want to say. So yeah, anyway. You only see this room once in your playthrough, so take a look. Pretty cool. And now we find ourselves on the roof of the castle. You also only see this area once, but you'll get to spend a little more time here.
Getting tired of playing your childish games.
Okay, so, final showdown with Phantom. Interestingly, he doesn't actually get any new attacks here. Pretty simple, just use what you know, and show this dude that you've gotten a lot stronger since you fought him last. You might notice that his arms are red now for some reason. Don't worry about that, I don't think that actually changes anything about him, except for maybe he does more damage now, but it's not a big deal.
You're right. I'm his son, Dante. Sweet dreams.
Defeated the Phantom. Incredible power.
Neat. So with Phantom out of the way, we can go ahead and progress again. Go through the grate, drop down here. And oh hey, grenade gun. Okay, so cool. The grenade gun's a big explosive weapon with a lot of end lag after you're done using it. It's also the only normal firearm that can't be used in the air. It's pretty simple, all things considered. I guess it can hit several enemies at once if they're close enough together, but it's, you know, it's a grenade gun, it's neat. Sick, we lowered the drawbridge, let's get the hell out of here. Okay, so actually, I think this is gonna go ahead and do it for this RTLG for now. This game specifically is looking more and more like a giant project, and I would like to try to keep a consistent schedule as much as I can. Part 2 should be done relatively soon here, but ultimately speaking, it'll be updated by Friday. It'll be uploaded by Friday. Until then, though, go ahead and subscribe, and stick around for part 2 whenever it comes out. Have a good one, y'all.
Sweet dreams.